In 2025, the world bought $3 trillion worth of oil, and almost all of it was paid in one currency. Not because every country agreed it was the best one, and not because some international law required it, because of a secret deal made in a Saudi desert in 1974 by a small group of men that most people have never heard of. That deal is why your parents stress about money. It's why rent keeps going up, why groceries cost more than they did a few years ago, and why nobody on the news ever quite explains the real reason behind any of it. America owes $39 trillion, it borrows more every year, and the number never goes down. And somehow it still has the best credit score on the planet. That's not an accident. It's not because the politicians are bad at maths, and it was never meant to be paid back. That was never the plan. Something is holding the whole thing up, and for the first time in 50 years, that something is starting to shake. Let's start with something that sounds completely crazy. America owes more money than any country, any company, or any empire in the entire history of the world, and the whole planet still lines up to lend it more every single day. Think about that for a second. If your neighbor owed $39 trillion, you would not be lending them money or even picking up their calls. But banks in China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia, countries that genuinely don't like America, still happily buy American debt because they can't think of anything better to do with their money. Why? The answer isn't trust. The answer is something much more interesting. To get it, you have to go back to 1944. World War II is almost over. Most of the world has been absolutely destroyed. Factories burned, cities flattened, economies in ruins. America, on the other hand, came out of it in the best shape it had ever been in. They had most of the world's gold, most of the working factories, and an economy growing faster than anyone had ever seen. So 44 countries got invited to a hotel in New Hampshire, and America made them a deal. Every country's money would be linked to the dollar, and the dollar would be linked to gold at $35 per ounce. That meant every currency in the world was basically backed by gold with one extra step in between. Everyone knew what their money was worth, everyone could trade, and the world could start rebuilding. Most countries said yes, mostly because they had no real choice. For about 20 years, it worked. Then America started spending big. Vietnam, the space race, a military that cost more than most countries' entire economies, and by the late 1960s, America was printing way more dollars than it had gold to back them up. France figured this out first. They looked at how many dollars were floating around, compared it to America's actual gold reserves, and did the maths. The numbers didn't add up, so France did something brilliant. They loaded up planes and ships with dollars, flew them to America, and demanded their gold back. 3,000 tons of it. Other countries followed, and America's gold reserves started draining away faster than anyone could stop. By 1971, it was over. Richard Nixon went on TV on a Sunday night and announced, with no warning and no vote, that dollars could no longer be traded for gold. He canceled the entire global money system in one speech. Now America had a serious problem. For 20 years, a dollar was worth something because you could swap it for a fixed amount of gold. Now it was just paper, backed by the promise that America would behave itself. And given the previous decade, that was a lot to ask. Something had to replace gold, some new reason for the whole world to want dollars, something that every single country needed every single day and that nobody could simply print more of. A man named Henry Kissinger, basically America's top guy for foreign deals at the time, had the answer: oil. In 1974, Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia, and the deal he made behind closed doors was straightforward. Saudi Arabia would sell all of its oil in US dollars, every barrel, every trade, no exceptions, and in return, America would protect Saudi Arabia with military backing, weapons, and the most powerful army on earth standing between them and anyone who wanted to cause trouble. Saudi Arabia agreed, and within a year, every major oil-selling country had quietly followed their lead, with no big announcement and no global meeting. Saudi Arabia moved, it made sense for everyone else, and the whole world fell in line. And just like that, if you wanted oil, you needed dollars first. A company in Japan buying oil from Saudi Arabia had to swap yen into dollars before the deal could happen. A factory in France, a power plant in India, everyone went through the same step. The entire world became permanently and constantly forced to want American money just to keep their lights on, and that created massive, never-ending demand for one country's currency. Demand is what makes a currency valuable. Strong demand means a strong dollar. A strong dollar means America can borrow money cheaply, and borrowing cheaply is exactly what lets you carry $39 trillion without the whole thing falling apart. The debt works because the oil deal makes the world need dollars. Here's where it gets really clever. All those oil-selling countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, were suddenly collecting billions and billions of dollars every month, way more than they could ever spend at home. So they needed somewhere safe to put it, and the safest place to put dollars has always been US government bonds. A bond is simple. You lend the government money, and they pay you back later with a little extra on top. up, so the loop looked like this. America bought oil and paid in dollars. Oil countries took those dollars and lent them straight back to America by buying bonds. America used that borrowed money to pay for schools, roads, the military, and retirement payments, and then went out and bought more oil. Round and round it went, and for 50 years, the rest of the world quietly helped fund the entire operation of the US government without most people in those countries ever realizing it. It was the most successful financial arrangement in history. Made in private, never voted on, never properly announced, and it quietly shaped the price of everything you've ever bought. Now here's the part that should make you sit up. This whole system has one weakness, and for the first time in 50 years, that weakness is being tested. What if the world stops needing to buy oil in dollars? In 2021, a quiet project launched out of a bank in Switzerland called mBridge. Nobody reported on it, nobody was talking about it, and most financial journalists had never heard the name. What it does is simple but significant. It lets countries send money directly to each other using their own currencies, completely skipping the dollar with no middlemen and no American oversight. To understand why that matters, you need to know how international payments work right now. If Thailand wants to pay China today, the money doesn't go straight there. It bounces through a chain of banks, gets converted into dollars, and passes through a system called SWIFT, which is basically the messaging network that banks use to talk to each other before it finally arrives. SWIFT handles around $5 trillion every single day and runs under Western control, which means it can be used as a weapon. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Western countries kicked Russian banks out of SWIFT and froze $300 billion of Russian savings with a phone call. Russia couldn't reach its own money. Every country in the world watched that happen, and a lot of them quietly started asking the same question. What if that happens to us? China didn't write a letter of complaint. China built a way out. By 2024, mBridge was running, and by late 2025, it had processed over 4,000 transactions worth $55 billion. That's small compared to what SWIFT does every day, but that's not the point. The point is that for the first time in 50 years, there is a real working road around the dollar system that countries are actually using right now. At the same time, something else was quietly shifting. Countries started buying oil without using dollars at all. India paid for Russian oil in rupees, Brazil and China traded directly with each other, and Saudi Arabia, the very country that helped build the Petrodollar System in the first place, started running some deals through mBridge. Here's why all of this matters to you personally. Not some investor or finance guy, but you. The US government currently pays over $1 trillion a year just in interest on its debt, not paying the actual debt back, just the fee for borrowing it, which is more than America spends on its military and schools combined. That interest bill stays manageable only because countries around the world keep buying US bonds, since more buyers means lower interest rates, and lower interest rates mean the government can keep borrowing cheaply. The interest rate on home loans follows the government's borrowing rate very closely, so when the government rate goes up, your monthly mortgage payment goes up with it. Between 2021 and 2023, the monthly payment on a $400,000 home loan jumped by nearly $1,300. Not because of anything you did, but because interest rates moved, and one of the reasons they moved is that the world's appetite for American debt is slowly shifting. A secret deal made between America and Saudi Arabia in 1974 is showing up in your rent right now. Has this ever happened before? Yes, and it's happened every single time a country has held the world's top currency. The Roman denarius was once the most important currency on earth. So was the Dutch guilder. So was the British pound. Each one, in its time, was exactly what the dollar is today, and each one eventually stopped being that. The pattern is always the same. The country with the top currency starts spending too much. The thing that made everyone want that currency slowly becomes less true. Other countries quietly start finding alternatives, and by the time it's obvious to everyone, most of the shift has already happened. When Britain lost its position, it didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened over decades. As prices crept up faster than wages, living standards quietly fell behind other countries, and ordinary people absorbed the cost in ways that never quite made the front page. Their money just went a bit less far every year for an entire generation. So is America finished? No, and this is where the honest answer gets complicated. The dollar's share of global savings has dropped from 85% in the 1970s to about 58% today, which sounds alarming until you look at what's in second place. The euro holds about 20%, and the Chinese yuan, which China has been pushing hard as the alternative, holds about 2%. Nobody has built a real replacement yet. mBridge is real but still small. The yuan is difficult for most countries to use internationally because China tightly controls how it can be exchanged, and BRICS has been talking about a shared currency for years without producing one. The world is looking for a door marked exit and just hasn't found one good enough to walk through. So is America's $39 trillion debt actually a problem? It depends entirely on whether the world keeps needing dollars. If it does, the system keeps going, the debt keeps growing, the interest gets paid, and everything more or less holds together. If it doesn't, demand for dollars falls, interest rates rise, mortgages get more expensive, imported goods cost more, and ordinary people pay the price through their bills and wages. Slowly, quietly, with no news alert to explain why. None of this feels like anything is happening, and that's the hardest part to explain. There's no day when someone announces the system is over. No crash, no alarm. It just slowly becomes a little less true each year, until one day everything costs more, and nobody can quite connect it to a reason. Go back to the feeling at the start of this video. A secret deal made by people most of us have never heard of, quietly showing up in your rent, your groceries, and your parents' stress about money every single month. That gap between what's actually happening and what most people are ever told can stay hidden for a long time. But it has never in the entire history of money stayed hidden forever. America built the most durable financial system the world has ever seen, and it is not collapsing, it is changing. $39 trillion of debt, held together by a system built in private 50 years ago, is being quietly worked around by countries that watched what happened to Russia in 2022 and decided they didn't want that to happen to them. The change is already visible in the numbers, if you know what to look for. Most people never figure it out. Now you do. Most financial things aren't actually complicated. They're just explained badly, and that's what this channel is for. If that sounds useful, subscribe.